In this video, I'll show you how I used the Loomis method as outlined in Andrew Loomis's Drawing the Head and Hands to draw professional comics. More specifically, how to draw aliens and alien heads, where you have to change anatomy and get interesting to create the weird and wonderful things that might be in your imagination. So drawing faces and human anatomy is its own challenge and something that I feel like we're all working towards. You can look at a lot of tutorials and demos, some of them on this channel, that talk about how to construct normal human anatomy. But what happens when you need to design and redraw again and again something that is not human anatomy? In this case, I've got this character, Moda, who is from the Star Atlas prequel comic, which is a project I've been working on for the last year, and it's just sort of dropped. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with you, and again, show you some of the process and behind the scenes work from that particular project. So if you're wanting to draw your own manga or comics, and specifically where you're designing your own interesting, strange, weird, and wonderful characters, stick around because this will be an interesting video where we dive into that subject. Alright, welcome to the Drawing Codex. My name's Tim McBurney. I've been a professional working artist for over 20 years, and on this channel, we're all about drawing cool stuff from our imagination, embracing the challenge of drawing, and mastering the craft of line and color illustration. Now, if you'd like to learn more about line and color illustration, which is exactly the same style and process that I use to create all of the artwork in this project, the Star Atlas Core prequel comic, then you can check out my free quick start guide. I go over, a very similar process to the one that I use day in, day out. And in that quick start guide, I'm trying to get you up and running quickly with your own sort of line and color style in Photoshop. I'll give you all of the PSDs and brushes and all of the information that I have that goes into my own daily working process. It's free. The link will be in the description. Go check it out. So this has been a really fun project to work with. Again, this is the cover that has the character that will be sort of, demoing, and I'll use as an example in this particular little sort of drawing lesson. Yeah, it's actually free. You can go read it. I'll put a few links in the description. We're sort of using this comic as a way to sort of promote the game world and get people excited about it. So yeah, it's completely free. You can get it on Apple Books and a whole bunch of other places. I'll leave some links down in the description so you can just go sort of read it and check it out. There'll be new episodes coming basically every month for the next sort of 18 months or so. So pretty cool. And yeah, again, it's been sort of one of the reasons why I haven't put up so many videos in the last month, because I've been really sort of crunching on some deadlines. But yeah, super exciting project. But yeah, let's just jump over to the drawing table and get started. All right, here we are at the drawing table. So we're going to draw some aliens, more specifically this character who is a main character in a comic book that I'm drawing. And what I want to talk about is how we would utilize constructive anatomy or systems like figure drawing for all it's worth, or drawing the head and hands that you might see from, someone like Andrew Loomis. And really, I'm just describing how I go about my day-to-day existence as an artist and how I use these things all day, every day to draw characters. And again, more specifically in this case, when we have to modify the anatomy here. Now, it's worth noting that, again, this character design is actually based off a design that was sort of this sort of race of alien creatures that was designed by and sort of set in motion by an amazing artist called João Lira. And he kind of designed a lot of the aliens for this video game, the Star Atlas video game that the comic is actually a prequel to. So this is, again, an interesting scenario where, I have to sort of create designs that kind of match the anatomical features of this particular alien race. And what I'm going to do is sort of talk about how I've done that and how you can do that as well if you have sort of science fiction ideas or monster ideas, etc., that you kind of want to take and, put into practice. How do we do that? Now, again, the basic sort of scenario, just to kind of, draw it out and, look at how this kind of happens, is that, again, we're just going to start with a pretty standard Loomis construction, which is where we find that main sphere of the head. And I'm going to find dimensionality within that sphere. I'm going to drop a line down the center. And I'm going to, just use this basic structure to then build off of. So we'll go over a little bit over the standard character, right? How we might sort of draw this other character in the game, in the comic that is based on the game. And we'll use that as a comparison. But for now, again, how I'm doing it is essentially just looking at the anatomical features that we sort of need to include. So my style for this particular comic is extending the jawline quite a bit down. So I have a slightly sort of longer line here than you would on sort of typical human anatomy, let's say. Again, that goes for the human characters as well. Everyone kind of has a slightly sort of longer nose to chin proportion, and the nose tends to be kind of quite compressed. So again, I'm not necessarily talking about realistic proportions here. We're mostly talking about comic book proportions, which you sort of get to make up. So normally when I'm doing this, again, I still start with a pretty standard proportional block in, and then, because that's something that I remember, and that's why these Loomis Method techniques are so important. And then I will sort of expand upon that. And what we do here is we sort of note the core proportional changes that you're going to find with a character like this. And that is going to be this, really, really large set of eyes, which will sort of push the cheekbones out, and also this sort of extended, sort of massive forehead, right? So if we sort of can find a look from the side, you can see that, again, this is a real sort of protrusion. Plus, obviously, there are tentacles. So the way we sort of do that is, the way that I do that is, again, just sort of remind myself where that sort of nose is going to be from a form structure point of view. And then I'm going to actually sort of place in some rough indications for just how big those eyes are, because that really helps me to define that proportion. Next, I'm always going to remind myself that, hey, look, if the eyes are that big, it means the cheekbones, which are essentially like, part of the orbital socket, they're going to sort of come out even more. Now, obviously, we're going to sort of come down here, and we're going to have sort of a mound of the mouth or something sort of similar. And then, again, for the style of the comic, we're going to go down a little bit further. And the other thing we have to consider is this kind of mass of extra stuff on the forehead. And the best way you can sort of visualize that, right, we sort of got a bit of putty eraser, right, is literally that what we're doing is just kind of like sticking some extra stuff on the forehead like that. So this is where, again, just getting good at your typical form drawing, right, being able to kind of, just draw jelly bean shapes and understand the structure will help, right? So yeah, I'm really just kind of adding essentially an extra kind of slice that's been taken off a sphere, right? So if we sort of think of the sphere, which is actually one of the things we do in the Loomis Method construction, and then we often kind of chop off, right? Or imagine we're kind of chopping off the side of the head, right? And so, you kind of have your sphere, and then you sort of take that little bit off it. Well, what we're then doing is essentially taking like a similar, right, sort of slab of bone, mass, flesh, and we're kind of putting it on top here. And then again, you can kind of see how that will structurally kind of blend into the nose. And again, once I have that sort of basic structure, then it becomes a lot easier to kind of visualize that form and start to kind of build these structures. Although, as I often say when I'm talking about using the Loomis method, I'm not, trying to replicate realism, right? I'm not trying to build this form. What I'm doing is sort of building much more of a stylized version. So I'm actually drawing a lot of the features iconically. And also, this is a work in progress, and I'm still figuring out how best to represent this with the style. And you can see here, I could probably add more forehead there to kind of properly match the reference. And that's part of the process of both creating a comic and dialing in your character designs, is it takes a while to kind of really get all of those things happening, at least for me, because again, I think you often have to respond to the needs of the actual project and kind of see how it works. So anyway, the next thing that we have is to understand that the neck on these kind of characters is a little bit longer, right? So we're typically going to have, like a long kind of neck here. Boom. And these aliens are called the Maurice. And I think there's quite a number of different alien factions within the game. So again, let me know if these kind of little demos are interesting. I'll do some more. One of the real challenges with this project is the need to match the look and feel of these different races with the concept art that is being produced, and a lot of the actual kind of in-game final sort of assets and stuff like that. For all these sort of different races. So here we're going to have some ears, and you can see again, if we look at the structure of the ear, it is a little bit different, right? It kind of has this, right? It has this kind of less lobe, but it will kind of stick out a little bit more. And again, it's hard to know whether that's just on this particular character, or right, whether that's something that we're going to persist with all of these designs. Again, that's one of the most enjoyable, fun things, is just exploring all these different sort of options as we, sort of build the game world and build the comic world and figure out what all this stuff actually looks like. So then again, each of these characters has a very specific set of sort of tentacles, right? They're not necessarily all the same. And on the character from the book, we sort of have one set of tentacles that kind of comes down here, and it sort of connects up here like this, whereas these ones are a little bit different. And then we have one larger sort of tentacle over here. And again, all we're sort of doing is feeling out and understanding what's happening, right, with that form. Again, think of it as your sort of toilet roll exercise. We need to sort of understand where those tentacles are going in 3 dimensions. And even though, that's not necessarily part of, of the Loomis method, again, we need to kind of understand and see where those tentacles and things are going in 3 dimensions. Even though that's not necessarily part of the Loomis method, it does really help to be able to add those different form elements to the character. So we have some sort of body mod style cool piercings and things on this character. And this is going to be the basic sort of structure, right? Boom. Boom. Now again, that construction, will typically look pretty rough. And again, that's why we can, take it back and just sort of see, well, look, that's the construction. That's kind of giving us the basic bits and pieces that we need. But yeah, let's pick out some specific little elements. See if we can refine this a little bit more. Let's get rid of that little example. So again, this is where this part of the demo is a little bit more about how we apply those concepts to a particular style. So in this case, the other thing that these characters have is some weird sort of extra anatomy that's kind of around their sort of nose area, which I just kind of simplify into these lines. And the mouth is just going to be a line, And I do like to kind of try and keep this cheekbone pretty sharp. And the other thing is we've got these, again, sort of scars or some type of extra anatomy, anatomical sort of stuff there that is kind of changing how those look. All right, so we sort of have some extra anatomy there. And here it's a matter of, for me, again, trying to find some lines which represent that form that we've got, right, that I've sort of mapped out. So I'm using that to kind of base the lines that I would kind of draw for the forehead. And again, I'm finding that the top of that line, this is where you can see kind of how I'm typically solving this problem. Right, so I just have the top line of the eye drawn, and then actually it's a pretty stylized solution where I'm just kind of drawing the bottom line there, and that will all sort of be made up in color. We have a bit of, again, extra sort of marking around the place to kind of help define, again, just like the character's specific anatomy around the chin and sort of there. And again, we've got this quite long neck. Bump, 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 bump. And then these markers here. So again, these are a little bit sort of simplified. A lot of these kind of flexy sort of marker things, again, just help to kind of show the form a little bit more. But yeah, it works a little bit better when things are kind of moving, because these lines kind of help to describe, so we sort of still got to keep them kind of fluid. Again, there's like sort of one main tentacle here that sort of goes actually behind those two, but we're not sort of drawing that for now. And then there is sort of a hair-like tentacles. And yeah, that's kind of how I would sort of solve that problem. Again, we could probably make these eyes even bigger, depending on how sort of far we want to push it. But yeah, that's kind of how I use these, ideas that, again, you would find in, in the Loomis Method books. For, see if we can find it here. Actually, I think the best example of it is in drawing the head and hands. And yeah, this thing that, again, most people, view as being what the Loomis method is, right? Which, again, is a simplification of that, as I've said on this channel many, many times. But it is actually really useful. And yeah, so let's just sort of do that on the fly a little bit more. And what we'll do is kind of, see if we can explore how that would be used. If we just kind of, are drawing quickly, right? So let's take a look at, if we were just doing standard anatomy, standard kind of human anatomy, but again, in a stylized form. So in that case, what we're going to do is, let's sharpen this pencil, is just define that initial form, right, as outlined in that Loomis method construction. We're going to define dimensionality of the form. And if we're doing a stylized version of an alien, right, it's going to be the same thing. Then we're going to find that point on the middle, right? We're going to draw down to find that center line. And again, what I tend to do is create a little bit of sort of structure where I kind of just define the limits of where the cheekbones and that sort of chin is going to be. And this is because this is my little interpretation of it, which, as I've said as well on the channel, is what you should do, is take these concepts that are part of constructive anatomy and, build on them. So, yeah, in this case, if we're sort of drawing a standard human character, again, I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to find some structure in there. Right, we've got all these different anatomical bits and pieces. But, yeah, mostly, once I kind of have that structure, I can then apply some sort of more iconic anatomy on top. And yeah, I'm normally, again, using the system where we sort of block things in, but then I actually start by building it out from the nose, because that is the best way, from my experience, to get a good sense of sort of structure and not sort of have the eyes and those kind of extra bits and pieces wander in the face. So again, I'm matching the ear position to the nose and eyes. So that gives us this kind of long jaw, which again looks a bit sort of, again, stylized and, can look a little bit kind of silly, which I kind of like. It has that sort of old school kind of superhero kind of look a little bit. So again, do the same thing here with this character, and that is kind of what we would get, except I'd probably make that neck a little bit sort of thicker, right? So that would be sort of the standard construction. And again, if we get rid of some of that construction, we can start to see that come to the fore. All right, so if we just kind of fiddling with it, because again, the structure gives you some of it, but so much of what you do then, if you're just dealing with a line, is really kind of refining that drawing, right? And just sort of being like, which lines of mine are going to give the character the precise feeling that I want. And again, that process is not always linear and logical, right? We're often kind of doing that a little bit more based on what feels right. So again, same thing here, right? We've got the same sort of structures, but again, I'll block in that, sort of larger cheekbone set, right? We'll draw the characters chin there. Again, we've got an ear, bump, bump, bump. And these are just sort of standard faces, right? Not from any sort of particular direction, but again, if you look at a lot of comics and a lot of work that you kind of have to do in that instance, that's kind of how it works, right? So much of comics is being able to quickly and easily just draw characters that you sort of know and, sort of act through them, right? Right, so then we've got this, it comes down here. Got this ear here. And again, I need to remember that neck is kind of like a bit longer. And again, we got this big main tentacle. So yeah, once you sort of get into the flow of it, right, it becomes a lot easier to make those sort of anatomical changes. Draw what you need to draw, get your job done, right? And I really find that the Loomis method has helped me a lot, with my day-to-day practice, right? This is what I'm doing at the moment, is just drawing these same characters all day, every day. And the reason that I go on and on about this stuff on the channel is because, it's one thing to kind of be looking at, YouTube videos of people who are kind of saying, hey, do this thing. This is something that, someone sort of wrote in a book, etc. But I feel like people are often arguing about these things in a very sort of academic way. And the reason I'm so sort of into it is because I actually find that, this kind of helps me day in, day out, and I do actually use it. But again, one of the other things I've sort of tried to talk about on the channel is that, I'm not following it slavishly. You have to sort of understand how these things work and sort of adapt them to your needs. I use it very differently to the way a lot of other people would do it, because again, I'm sort of stylizing these things, right? I'm building characters that sort of don't exist, and again, I'm creating sort of very simple stylizations, and that's a very sort of personal way to sort of apply these concepts. So hopefully that's sort of been interesting, and you can kind of see again sort of how I'm using it. And there's a lot of other sort of layers on top of this. We could, these are just kind of sketches, right? If I was doing this, I'd probably go a little bit slower, see if I can, really sort of nail that structure, etc. But yeah, hopefully you can see how these things are kind of utilized. And there's a lot of other sort of alien races and things in this comic. So if you guys want, let me know, leave me a comment, let me know what you'd like in terms of content related to making comics specifically. It's a really good opportunity because I'm, doing this all day, every day, and more than happy to share some of that process stuff, answer questions, etc. That project is also why I have been not posting quite as many YouTube videos as I would like, and that'll probably continue for the next month or so. But hopefully, I'll get back in the swing of doing again sort of 2+ videos a week, because that's sort of what I like to do. Anyway, that's all for this one. Let me know if you got any comments or questions down below, and we'll catch you around. Happy drawing.